Place and the Meraki Institute of Learning proudly present Together We Rise, a series on capturing the journeys of resilience and well-being based on the Rise, Wellness, and Resilience framework. For those of you who are joining us today for the first time, this show is a series digging deep into the concept of resilience. In this interview series, we are talking to those in the corridor who have exhibited courage and strength in the face of hardship. These individuals are here with us to share their personal story of resilience. We hope this series will inspire hope and possibility in others. Because when we call on our courage and show up in the midst of struggle, we offer a bright place and to not give up. Together we can rise with the means to manage, restore, and grow. Welcome, Lori. Thank you so much for being here with us today and for being a part of this project. Lori, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Lori Ampey, as you just said. I am a mother of several wonderful kids. I am gay. I have a partner who I've been with for over 16 years. I currently work at the Boys and Girls Club as the Director of Programming and Outreach. I also work at Tanager Place as the Director of the LGBTQ Youth Center. I've worked at the Boys and Girls Club now for 22 years. Wow. I love every day of it. Tanager and the LGBTQ Center has always been one of my dreams. So obviously that's one of my passions as well.
Yes, lovely. Lori, you know, you and I have connected around your story and your journey because I think it's such a powerful story and one that to me really demonstrates like the heart of resilience and the heart of wellness. And when I think of the RISE framework, so many of the elements shine through as a part of your story. And so I want to then start with that journey and what some of that adversity and struggle was like for you, so that then we can kind of uncover throughout what cultivated your resilience to get through those hard times.
Well, where do I start? I can't say when it started because then everybody will know how old I am. So I'm just going to say a while ago. It all kind of started, I grew up in Marion, Iowa, and I grew up at a time when there was not a variety of races in Marion, Iowa. It was majority of white people who lived in that town. I happened to be one of only 3 black students in a school. So as you can tell, I was a minority. Yeah. We're coming out of a time where racism was just very prevalent. It was whites, it was blacks, it was during segregation, and so schools weren't very welcoming. Community wasn't very welcoming. You know, as parents, they don't know, you know, how to navigate this world for a child who to other people seems different. Yeah. I struggled greatly in school. I think one, to fit in. I think just it got picked on a lot, you know, and I think it was one of those things that people didn't know. They just didn't know about someone of color. They didn't know their culture or how they operated. Or I mean, people always saw us as different. Skin color being different, hair being different. So that created a lot of obstacles for me. I laugh sometimes and say, because I'm also gay, and so I laugh sometimes and say, I don't think people even realized I was gay as a child because they spent so much time focusing on the color of my skin. Sure. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but I know that struggling with not only being able to fit in school, education-wise, I didn't really have the opportunity to enjoy school. At an early age, I enjoyed my early years. But then as I got into school further, I didn't really get to enjoy my time because my days were about survival and being able to get from one class to another and without having to fight someone off. my days kind of consisted of getting suspended from school, going home, which followed me into my later years.
Yeah. When we talked, I just remember such a huge piece of your story and talking about the abuse by the hands of other students and teachers that you were going to school with. And I love what you said, that there's just this fear of this unknown, that you looked different than perhaps maybe they were used to. And so it came then to this place of just treating you so incredibly poorly and attacking you and being violent towards you, and teachers who would even then be violent towards you. Mm-hmm. And there's something you said that stood out to me so deeply, is it robbed you of your education, which then so deeply felt like robbed you of opportunity.
Yes, definitely. What people always miss is what happens before an incident. And I think in my case, it was always me being the singled out person and the one who was causing the trouble, and this kid is just a bully, and this kid is never going to amount to anything. And I shared a story with you. I know when I talked about going to a small town in Monticello. And I remember, like many kids, athletics was something that saved me. And I remember people in the stands just throwing stuff at me and calling me a nigger and not understanding, where all of that hate came from. And on top of it, having parents that also could not understand. So I think my education became, like I said, less important to me. And I know that when you spend your day fighting racism or homophobia or any other thing that kids fight every day, your education and what you learn, your knowledge is less important to you. The knowledge that you gain is that of survival. Yeah. And that is what happened to me, and that's where I was.
Yeah. You talked about that in connection with also then dealing in a home environment mm-hmm. of a biracial family mm-hmm. and people within your family units who also were not accepting totally of who you were in this world.
Right.
Tell me what that was like and how that impacted just your self-worth and how you viewed yourself.
Things are really different now.
Yeah.
But back then, now you have that choice in that category to be biracial, but back then you didn't have that. You were automatically considered African American. There was no in between. That being said, there was, in the home, my mother did not know how to respond to me, to help me, to give me advice. So for me, it was a matter of you stay in the car, you can't go in the store because people wouldn't understand. And then for my sister, it was a little bit different because her skin was a little bit lighter and her hair was a lot straighter. So I think just having to go through those, sitting in the car and not being able to go in the store, and even her family not accepting and not liking people of color just in general. I mean, which would lead me to be with my dad often. Yeah. And I think that kids nowadays, I'm glad that they have the ability to be able to represent who they are and how they feel racially.
Sure, yes.
And I don't think things have changed drastically. I think there's changes, and I think there's good changes, but I still think that we still face the same thing that we faced back then. Yeah. It's just in a different way, and we're just in a different decade, a different century.
And that's what resonates so much as a part of your story, is that then what brings up to me is George Floyd, and that it's not that much different. There is still so much battling mm-hmm. for people of color, for oppression and for systematic racism and for bullying and having potentially teachers who don't look like them, who have unconscious bias, who are doing similar things to them, which you had to experience mm-hmm. when you were a child. You maintained some level of hope throughout your childhood, mm-hmm. and throughout adolescence. How did you do that?
I had two mentors in the form of Nancy Humbles and Susie Bashirs, who passed away just recently, who a couple years ago, who had worked at Jane Boyd and really had been the person that had taken me off of the street. With Susie, she never gave up. She always saw that good in me. She always knew that I was going to be something. She thought I had that drive and that ambition to help others. And she took me, and I worked at Jane Boyd for about 8 years, and that was what would ultimately kind of start my career in youth development. But I had a love of sports, so Susie took me into coach, and I loved coaching. That was the one thing that would keep me out of trouble later in life, was that the ability to know that I had made this commitment to these kids and to be there for them and to coach for them. And then Nancy Humbles was the one that helped me finish and get a diploma. And again, we connected through a softball team called Brown Sugar, which was an all-black women's softball team.
Yeah.
And so, Nancy was that, and it still is that, just that driving force in my life. Some people think that when you have mentors that you need somebody that's going to, kind of coddle you and baby you. And Nancy was never that for me. She was very mother-like to me, but she was also very direct, and she was very stern, and she gave me that tough love that I needed. There are so many things that Nancy and Susie instilled in me that I have used throughout my entire career to help other kids.
Yeah.
And without them, I would not be here.
Yeah, and goodness, kids you have helped, Lori, when I look at your legacy in this community, oh my goodness, you have impacted so many youth's lives. And I think what stands out to me is that you felt this calling to do that because of your experience. So much of your adversity and your struggle then turned around and gave, to me, it seems like your life meaning and purpose, all rooted in then the relationships that cultivated you to have self-love and to know that you are worth it and that you are smart and that you are capable, and pushed you to reach your highest potential. And now you give that back to so many kids that you work with. Tell me about that for yourself and that meaning and purpose and how it has shaped your life.
I think two things stick out to mind that happened to me. One was that at Thanksgiving at our house, we would have a black Thanksgiving and a white Thanksgiving. And, I always, later on in life, of course, and even then I thought, God, this is just the weirdest thing. Why can't we all eat together? But it wasn't like that back then. And then what comes to mind is how teachers viewed me and treated me. It was always my fault. There was never a before. And for some reason, I always said to myself that if I ever had the opportunity to work with kids, if I ever had the chance to do that I was never, ever going to treat a child differently because of the color of skin. That is something that I have maintained for my whole entire career, is that my objective is to help youth, not to segregate them, not to divide them, but to bring everybody together. It doesn't matter if you're gay, it doesn't matter if you're straight, it doesn't matter if you're black, you're white, if you have mental health. It's one of those things where bringing people together and bringing kids together collectively in one program, in one setting, has been what I have set out to do. And I think I've done a pretty good job at that.
Yeah.
There's been struggles along the way. When I first started in the youth development field, still being gay and being a woman and being black were still things that were not high up on everybody's list.
Yeah.
You couldn't really say you were gay, because of the backlash that would come with that. So in a sense, I was still trying to help others, but yet had to still hide who I was. And so, when it comes to working with kids, I think, especially the LGBTQ community and the youth that I serve and work with there, it's so important that they're able to be who they are and be able to fight through the adversities that they're going to face.
Yeah.
And, I kind of liken that to me and color when I was growing up. And I think if I can help one kid, be able to want to get an education and not focus on survival, then that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Lori,
Tell me a little bit about your path to feeling comfortable in your identity and what you say to youth that you're working with who don't feel comfortable, who parents are maybe rejecting them or friendship groups are rejecting them, where they don't feel safe being who they are.
I think, for me, I think it was a journey. It took a long time. It took the help of two great mentors to impact my life. And I know that mentorship is so important. And I think along with mentorship and being a good mentor, you have to be consistent.
Yeah.
You have to, kids are taught how to behave and what beliefs they're going to have. It's like at an early age when, we're taught that, pink is girls and blue is boys, and, boys cannot play with kitchen stuff. And I think those are all taught things to kids. And, for me, I always saw the opposite. How can we expect to have a chef that's a male if he can never be allowed in the kitchen? And so my journey always took me outside of the box to do things. I've always liked to do things that other people don't want to do or don't see. I have always been pretty comfortable with kind of coloring outside the lines, as they would say, because I think those are the things that we have to touch on most. Yeah. I think that for me as a kid, the one thing I struggled with greatly was feeling a sense of, do I deserve to be loved, and do I deserve to have a future? Yeah. And I think for many kids that are in my situation, they have to believe that they're worthy of someone believing in them. Yeah. And I think that comes from, still giving that love to parents who don't know how to raise you, don't know what to do, and not by any fault of theirs, but maybe by what they went through. So my journey is wrapped around a lot of what happened to those before me. Yeah. What was my mother's life like? What was my father's life like? And I try to put myself in that position in every situation. This kid is acting like this today, but I don't know what happened before then. Everything to me is what happened first. That's how I maintain working with kids every day. I do a firm, fun, and fair. I need them to know that I love them. I need them to know that there are boundaries. And, I also need them to know that there has to be fun and there has to be a bright light in life. So.
There's two things that you talked about that I want to tease apart a little bit, because I think that they're so important. One of those pieces is in the RISE framework, we talk about social emotional development, and one of the pieces there is empathy. Every time that I've talked to you, Lori, it is this shining light of empathy for other humans. Yes. That there's not this anger or hatred towards the people who did you harm, towards family members, towards pain. It is what it is, and being empathetic towards potentially what they may have experienced or where their thoughts were coming from or their experiences and how it brought them to where they were. And not that you have to then tolerate how they treat you, but perspective taking. And it seems like that has aided so deeply in your resilience and your desire to give back love to this world. Like, you just exude this empathy. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I think one of the things for me was people could never meet me where I was. It was always, I had to be this person, or I had to do this, or this was wrong. It was never, Lori, you're okay, just how you are, and we can grow from there. And I think I've tried to take that with the kids that I work with. I mean, wherever they are, that's where we got to start, and that's the starting point. Doesn't matter where it is. I see them facing, some of them being in juvenile detention, some of them being suspended from school all day, but that's okay, because that's where we got to start. And I think one of the first things I try to do with all the kids is understand from the beginning that they have a connection to the people that raised them, to the people that gave birth to them. And so my job's not to discredit them or take away who they love and have loved in their life. My job is to strengthen the bond between them.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of, I've always kind of worked in that area. Sometimes people expect things of kids, and the kids have no idea what they're even talking about.
Yeah.
You know, if you're in survival mode, as I talked about earlier, and you're struggling to get from class A to class B safely, you could care less about what the history lesson of the day is.
Yes.
I could say that. I just could care less.
The other piece that you talked about that I feel like is so important is you said, you know, for kids who don't color in the lines. And absolutely our society has these norms of who we should be in the world, right? And what is good versus bad, you know? And so much about your story and so much about the youth you work with are cultivating these strengths and this greatness and this beauty inside kids that maybe society has not said is beautiful. How did you do that for yourself, and how do you do that for kids when a world is often telling them that who they are is not acceptable?
I think for me, I had a mentor in my life who told me that, you know, how I was and who I was okay. And they told me that I was valuable. They made me believe that I was valuable. So, I mean, that's half the battle. I think once you can get kids to understand that they have a place in the world, and you got to provide the place in the world for them. You know, it's one thing to say, you know, oh, you know, you're going to do great. It's different when you provide that opportunity for them.
Give them experiences in which they can show their greatness and live true to themselves.
And I think every moment that they shine, I feel like I win right alongside with them. And I know that Nancy, and I know that Miss Humbles and Susie feel that same way. I know that every time that I accomplish something, they feel that greatness and that accomplishment that they were such a big part of. I think there's so many pieces to puzzles for kids. There's no one single person that helps them alone. I think it takes a lot of different people. But I also know that the kids are faced these days still with racism. You know, I know at the center, kids greatly go through obstacles every day at school. But I think getting them to understand that they are somebody, and it doesn't matter what they did, I think that's important. That was important for me, is for somebody to come along and say, listen, I don't care if you was in jail. I don't care that you got in trouble. I don't care if you don't have a degree. You still are of value. And once I had somebody say that to me, my possibilities were endless. But to me, the biggest thing for a child is getting them to believe that part. That's the hardest part. Everything else is easy. The hardest part is getting them to buy into they're somebody.
Yeah. The power of relationships, the power of one person who really believes in us and loves us and who is able to reflect that greatness. And the ripple effect that has, because you had those one or two people. Now you've been that person for hundreds and hundreds of children. And I have no doubt then that they will be someone for hundreds of people. And just the ripple effect of that greatness and that kindness. And you could have taken the pain that you experienced early in life and turned it into this anger and this hatred and this revenge, but you turned it into giving back to others to allow them to cultivate their greatness. And Lori, a blessing that is. Any last piece of advice for kids who are struggling and parents, adults who are looking on how to be that one person for kids? What would you say?
I would say first, for parents, you have to be okay with who you are, where you are, and what you went through. It's okay. And I think once you can tell yourself that as a parent, everything else is going to fall into place. You just have to believe that one thing. I think for kids, again, it's almost the same thing. It's, you have to believe that you're worthy, because I could tell you all day that you're worthy, but until you actually believe it, nothing will change. So I think those are two things that I think are important. I think that, always remembering that, inclusion shouldn't just be some places or somewhere or some people. Inclusion is for everyone. Yeah. You can't post a sign and say, we support inclusion and not walk the walk. I see that many places. It's that you have to welcome everybody, no matter who they are, into your space, to your school, to your organization. I mean, those are the things that are going to change kids' lives. Just as we were taught, as I said earlier, what pink and blue represented it. The kids still have it in them to learn better behaviors, just as I have.
Yeah.
And it wasn't easy.
No. But I think you're absolutely right that everyone's voice matters. Inclusion is saying that everyone, no matter your race, your age, your sexual identity, your whatever it is, your voice matters and you matter in this world, and showing up, being yourself, makes this world a better place.
Yes.
Lori, thank you so much for sharing your story and for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Support is out there. Staff members and the people that I met along the way just made me realize that there are genuine people out there that actually just want to help.
Reach out to somebody.
It's okay to literally not be okay.
Have somebody in your corner.
How do you become your best self for others if you're not doing that for yourself first?
I was rescued.
It will get better. No matter how bad it is. It won't get perfect, it won't go away, but it will get better.
We all have that humanity in common. We can't lose sight of that.
People struggle sometimes. That's okay.
And I have people that showed up for me when I didn't expect it. And I have people who showed up for me at times in my life and now they're not a part of my life. And that's okay too.
Kind of like to think of it as like some butterfly effect.
You have to find what makes you happy.
I'm here for a reason. And my future self is going to be so thankful that I didn't throw in the towel because it got tough.
I am who I am, but I will never be able to be the part of somebody else.
Life choices I made may be the reason that I'm having a harder time and not feeling shame in that.
No matter the challenges you and your family face, Tanager Place is here for you. We'll meet you wherever you are in your journey and together define a path to reach your goals. Together we rise. Tanager Place.
Thank you again for joining us today and for spending time with us. We hope today's segment offered hope and healing. Today's series brought to you by Tanager Place and the Meraki Institute of Learning. For more information, please visit our website.